These are the quiz corrections for quiz number 24 on May 15, 2015. Question number 1 says factor completely. You can look back at, this was on last week's quiz, quiz number 23. Same thing with question number 2. For question number 3, it says solve. Notice how there's nothing in front of the parentheses or afterwards, just the power of 2. So I'm going to take the square root. You're left with x minus 3. The square root of 1 is just 1. Two identical numbers that multiply together to be 1. And remember, we take the square root of an equation, it's plus or minus. I'm going to add 3 on both sides. The 3 goes to the left of the plus or minus. You have x equals 3 plus or minus 1. So 3 plus 1 is 4. And 3 minus 1 is 2. Letter choice B. Question number 4. I'm going to multiply here. I have no other exponents on the outside, so I can just multiply. I'm going to multiply my constants. So negative 4 and a negative 9 gives me a positive 36. So that would actually eliminate all of my choices. My answer is then B. Remember, when you're multiplying with the same base, y times y to the 9th, there's a 1 there. You're multiplying the same base, add the exponents. 1 plus 9 equals y to the 10th. Question number 5. We need to distribute all of ours, so that'll become a positive 4x squared, negative 2xy, and a minus 3y squared. We're going to have 5x squared minus 3xy plus 9y squared. And I'm just going to look for my like terms, 5x squared and negative. No, that's wrong. These two. So 5 and a 4, that gives us 9x squared. So I know it's either C or D. I can eliminate A and B. I have negative 3xy and a negative 2xy. They'll give me a negative 5xy, and that's the only choice that has it. And that's 6y squared. Question number 6. Which choice matches the graph? I notice I have a horizontal parabola. Horizontal parabola means that x is to the first power and y is to the second power. This graph of this equation always opens to the right. That's the default. But in this equation, it's opening to the left, which means your a value is negative. So that would be choice C. Each of those worth 2 points each. Question number 7. Find the quotient and remainder using synthetic division. I told you in class you didn't have to because it's multiple choice. I don't check your work. This is through synthetic division. If x plus 9, you set it equal to 0, then x is equal to negative 9. And that's why I write the negative 9. So I'm showing you synthetic division. I have the coefficients 1, 12, 34, and 68. First one you always bring down. Then you multiply. Then you add, which gives 3. Multiply. Then add. Multiply. Then add. This last one is your remainder. So several of them had remainders of 5, choices B, C, and E, but only one of them had a positive 1x squared plus 3x plus 7. That would be choice E. Remember, the coefficients that you have left over are the same power that you started with, but 1 less than that. So 1 less than x to the third is x to the second. Question number 8 is a little bit difficult because your GCF was a fraction. Use completing the square right in vertex form. So if I factor out a 1/2, I'm going to be left with 1/2 x squared minus 4x. Remember, you can always distribute the 1/2 to check your answer. 1/2 times x squared gives you 1/2 x squared, and 1/2 times negative 2x will give us yeah, 1/2 times negative 4x will give us a negative 2x. Once I take out my GCF, I'm just going to take half of that value, which is negative 2, and square it. Half of negative 2 squared is positive 4. Here's probably the harder part. If I add 4 here, it's not minus 4. The reason why is it's 1/2 times positive 4, which is a positive 2, therefore that one's a negative 2. Remember, the previous problem would look like this. And there's your 0. Then you can just factor that, x minus 2 squared. That'll become 9, and that is choice C. Question number 9. 4 students solve the same math problem. Each student's work is shown below. Who is correct? The answer is A. The reason why, there's several reasons. When you're multiplying the same base, you can add the exponents, so this will become x to the negative 3. And x to the negative 3, you just put it over 1. Remember, you bring it downstairs, take off the negative, and if there's nothing left in the numerator, you just write a 1. The mistake for this one is they try to bring it down right away, but they didn't take off the negative. Student D is incorrect. Student D is incorrect because they tried to do subtraction, which is fine, 2 minus 5, but your answer is x equals negative 3, not positive 3. Student B made the mistake of moving the negative 5 down right away, but they didn't take off the negative sign. And then when you subtract, that would be 2 minus the negative 5. They should have gotten a positive 7. So that's why all of those are wrong, and student A is correct. Question number 10 is a common missed question. What is the equation of a circle whose center is 2, negative 5 with a radius of 4? So notice how I write out my vertex form for a circle, or just the equation of a circle. I'm going to substitute in h is 2, and my k value is negative 5, so this will become y minus negative 5, which is plus 5. But look over here, the equation says r squared. So if your radius is 4, the common mistake was actually to think it was choice B. But I have to take the 4 and I have to square it. So x minus 2 squared plus y plus 5 squared equals 16 is not one of my choices. My answer is D, none of the above. Question number 11, I have this crazy graph. Find the function f whose graph is shown below. Okay, so there's a couple of things I should be looking for. Number 1, I recognize that it starts up but ends down. So I know it's an odd. I know it's an odd because they're opposites, right? So if it was, say, for example, x to the third. X to the third looks like this. Does that make sense? Starts down, ends up. But because it's switched, I know that there must be a negative sign in here. So I'm going to look for a negative. A does not have a negative, and D doesn't have a negative. So it's only now between B and C. The second thing I can think of is when I go through my graph, I can actually figure this out. Well, if x is equal to negative 1, it's going through it, so that's a shoot through. A shoot through means it has a multiplicity that's an odd. There at 0, x equals 0, and you have a shoot through because it's going through it, which means its multiplicity or its exponent is odd. Same thing at negative 1. I recognize that x is equal to 1, multiplicity is odd, there's a shoot through. And the only even I have in the problem is that x equals 2. Your multiplicity is even, therefore it's a kiss. So I look here. The only difference between this problem here, between B and C, is the x. Do you see it? That little x there, right, that's negative 1. That's positive 1. Oh, sorry. X equals negative 1 here, positive 1 here, x equals 2 here, but you don't have a binomial for that one here, and that's the only one that has it. Remember, zero product rule means you set that equal to 0. If you're confused, you can always just go through each of these. It's kind of painstakingly in a multiple choice is to graph each one of these and match your graph. That's another way of doing the problem. Question number 11. That was on last week's quiz, so you can watch last week's video. Question number 12, you're essentially doing multiplying these binomials twice. So when you multiply 2k minus 1 and then k plus 2, you should have gotten 2k squared plus 3k minus 2. and then you'll multiply it by k minus 3. Notice how using area model, multiply, multiply, and then you'll combine like terms. You should have gone 2k to the third minus 3k squared minus 11k plus 6. Free response question is worth 4. Question number 13, you need to match these. I did give you more choices on purpose. If I look through this, x, this is the only x, and it's to the first power. The y is to the second power. That's a horizontal parabola. So horizontal parabola just has x to the first power, then y to the second power. I look here and I recognize that x and y both have to the first power, which means that's the highest power, which means that's a linear equation, D. And if x and y both have to the power of 2, it's automatically a circle. So that would be E. Question number 14 was essentially on last week's quiz. The only difference I made was I changed the word from factor to solve. So to first factor the problem, you're going to take out your GCF, which is 4x squared, and you're left with this polynomial. Here you can take your A, B, and your C. A times C, and your B value. My two are numbers are -2 and -3. Remember when you're doing your x in your box here, or if you're doing snowflake, that -2 is -2 x squared. And -3 there is -3x squared. I put in my first term inside the parentheses on my last term, and I just take out my greatest common factor. This is x squared. Out of here is -2. Out of here was x squared, and out of here is a -3. So then I write those here, here, and here. Then I'm going to do 0. So a lot of students stopped like right here. That's what you need to have. It's not factorable anymore. Each of these are prime factors. That would be if the direction said to factor completely, but it says solve, which means you need to set it equal to 0. And now you set each of these equal to 0. Divide by 4, that's still 0. Take the square root, that's still 0. Common mistake for this one is forgetting your plus and minuses. Question number 15. Simplify with no negative exponents. What I did is I distributed this -2 first, even to that 4. So I get 4 to the -2. -2 times -2 is to the 4th power, and that becomes y to the -6. And you also need to distribute this now to the exponents in the denominator. So that becomes x to the -2. That's y to the +8. Notice how I only circled problems where it had a negative exponent. It's going to go down, up, that's going to go down. So this becomes 4 to the 2nd power. Remember, take off the negative sign when you move it. That becomes 16. X squared times x to the 4th, same base. Multiplying the same base, add the exponents. That's x to the 6th, and that's y to the 14th. Question number 16. You need to evaluate. That's one clue. The word evaluate just means to take this number and substitute it in. Plug and chug is a common word for students. So there's my direct substitution. -6 to the 4th power is 1296. This one here, order of operations, that would be 36 times -2 is -72 plus 3. And you'll get your answer is P of -6 is 1227. If you did synthetic substitution, you'll get the same answer. I give you 2 points if you just made the substitution. I give you 3 points out of 4. Maybe you made a mistake, one of those. Question number 17, I made 2 points each. Degree of the polynomial, well, if it starts down and finishes up, it has to be an odd. The leading coefficient is positive because I don't flip it, right? Think back to x to the 1st. Starts down, ends up. As x approaches positive infinity, that means going from left to right. My graph finishes up. When it finishes up, On the y-axis, that's positive infinity. X approaches negative infinity, that's going from right to left. So going this way, and I finish going down. Finishing down is negative infinity. Question number 18, this was on last week's quiz. Students who weren't showing the correct amount of work were receiving zeros. You could have used long division or synthetic division. In that problem, don't forget your placeholder. Question number 17 was another top 3 most missed question. Made you really have to think. Which one doesn't belong? Which one means there's only one of these that doesn't belong. Determine which equation is not like the others. The answer is, I gave you 2 points if you got this one right here, and then 2 points for a correct explanation. X to the 4th plus 1 is not factorable. X to the 3rd plus 1 is. This is called a difference of cubes. This is called a difference of squares. You could have just written plus 0 or minus 1, same thing over here. This is the one where you need your equation, a plus b times quantity a squared minus ab plus b squared. Same thing with r third to the minus 8. You could have factored that one. That was a minus b, a squared plus ab plus b squared. Question number 20. This one was only worth 4 points. Free response, graphing it. I got a negative x squared out of this, and an x. So my basic graph looks like negative x to the 4th. X to the 4th starts up, ends up because of x squared, right? So with a negative, that means I'm going to start down, end down. Start down, end down. Zero product rule, because it's already in factored form. I got x equals 0. Its multiplicity is 1 because there's a little coefficient 1 right there. That means it's odd, it's a shoot through. X minus 3 means x is equal to 3. Has a multiplicity of 2 there, which is even, you'll kiss. And x plus 1 equals x equals negative 1, multiplicity 1, shoot through. So start here. I'm going to hit negative 1 first, so it means I shoot through it. And then 0, I shoot through it as well. But when I approach 3, it's an even, so I'll kiss it, and I finish down. 1 point for a graph starting down, ending down. 1 point for your x-intercepts correctly and labeled. 1 point for y-intercept, which is 0, and 1 point for your x-intercept behaviors, the multiplicity, kiss, shoot through. And question number 21. Find the equation of a line that contains 3, negative 5, and is parallel. So I just changed the word from the last quiz. Parallel means it has the same slope, negative 1/2. So I have negative 1/2 and 3, negative 5. Substitute that into point slope. You have an equation there, simplify there. You have an equation in point slope form. Or if you distribute the negative half, you would have gone y equals negative 1/2 x minus 7/2 in slope intercept form.